Before you ever learn to control your urges, you must surrender the fantasy that you're free, not in the way you think, because the man who believes he's acting from will often isn't. He's reacting from wounds. You think you chose the craving, but it was chosen for you by absence, by memory, by someone who once withheld something you didn't know you needed. Zeno of Citium didn't find Stoicism in a temple or a scroll. He found it drowning, shipwrecked, broke, his plans, wealth, and direction all torn from him at sea. And in that loss, something shifted. He didn't seek to rebuild control over life. He rebuilt control over his responses, over his urges. The ship was gone, but clarity remained. That was the birth of the Stoic path, not dominance over events, but dominion over the self. Zeno believed that every unchecked desire is a string tied to someone else's hand. Society pulls one, an old lover pulls another. Guilt, shame, nostalgia. You think you're moving forward, but you're being dragged. And until you trace the string back to its source, you will never walk freely. You'll just be a marionette with the illusion of direction. Seneca once warned about this illusion. He said, chasing your urges is like following candlelight in a storm. It glows just enough to make you believe it's real, but it flickers, dances, seduces, and then it disappears. You're left stumbling through the dark, chasing warmth that was never meant to last. Most men live this way, burning for things that were never theirs to hold. There is a trap, one almost every man falls into. We confuse suppression with mastery. We think discipline means holding it in, toughening up, pushing through. But that's not Stoicism. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress. It teaches you to see clearly, to name the urge, to stare it in the face and say, I know what you are, and I will not move. What makes a man powerful isn't how much he feels. It's how little he lets those feelings rule him. The Stoic warrior is not numb. He is awake, but he knows that fire isn't always warmth, that desire isn't always direction, and that not every emotion deserves a reaction. Your masculinity is not defined by what you crave. It's defined by what you contain, by what you choose to hold in silence. Because silence isn't emptiness, it's armor. And sometimes the most powerful act isn't to fight or to speak or to run. It's to remain, still, anchored, present, while the storm rages and the candle flickers, and every urge begs you to chase what you already know will leave you hollow. This is not the beginning of control. It's the beginning of clarity, of confrontation, of rebuilding your power not through denial, but through deep recognition. And that begins now. Most men believe they're chasing pleasure, but that's not the truth. The truth is quieter, harder to face. You're chasing permission, permission to feel something, to be someone. That craving doesn't come from lust. It comes from a deeper ache, the ache of not being seen, of not being heard, of walking through life like a provider, a protector, a planner, but never a man who is allowed to feel alive without earning it. You don't reach for the screen, the bottle, the plate, because you want pleasure. You reach because for a few moments, it silences the doubt. It tells you, you're okay now. You can stop trying. It mimics approval, mimics love, mimics peace, but it fades. And every time it fades, it leaves you emptier than before. Underneath the craving is a question. Am I allowed to feel joy without condition? And the answer you give yourself, by your actions, is often no. That's the trap. That's the loop. Stoicism doesn't fight that craving. It exposes it. It asks, what are you trying to escape from, not toward? Because the urge is never the enemy. It's just the voice of a boy inside a tired man, still asking if it's finally safe to be whole. Most men never learn to name emotional hunger, so it finds another voice, one that feels less vulnerable, more acceptable. Lust, desire, the late-night craving that says it's about touch, but carries the weight of abandonment. It's not sex you long for, it's connection. It's not her body, it's the way being wanted makes you feel human again. Oxytocin, the hormone of bonding, of being held, of being remembered, fades in men who live emotionally alone. The body responds by chasing intensity, but what it's truly asking for is softness, not weakness, not passivity. Softness, the kind you were once denied when you needed it most. The kind that says, you matter, without demanding you perform. Chrysippus, another Stoic voice, once said no urge is pure. Every desire is tinted by story. Yours might be rejection, or shame, or the echo of a love that never arrived. So the body compensates. It creates fire where there was once frost. It calls it need, but need isn't always honest. Sometimes it's just the silence screaming through the only channel it knows. An urge is never just about the present. It's a spark that touches something old, something unresolved. Behind every compulsive act, there's a moment that was never mourned. Betrayal you minimized, humiliation you buried, rejection you convinced yourself didn't hurt, but the body remembers. And when clarity is absent, the past leaks into now. You don't reach for the escape because you're weak. You reach because something in you still hasn't been seen, and urges become the only language that pain understands. The same trigger, the same cycle, not because you want to repeat it, but because your nervous system thinks it's protecting you from the memory, from the silence after it. When men don't speak their wounds, those wounds find other ways to speak, through addiction, through rage, through obsession. It's not about the thing you chase. It's about the feeling that keeps chasing you. Memory becomes habit when it goes unspoken. And Stoicism doesn't ask you to relive the pain. It simply asks you not to lie to yourself about where it began. Fantasies aren't random. They're architecture built on absence. Every scene you replay, every imagined touch, every perfect moment, it's rarely about pleasure. It's about repair. You fantasize about being wanted because there was a time you weren't. You imagine power because there was a moment you were stripped of it. You seek intimacy not out of lust, but because your truth was never received, your pain never dignified. Desire becomes fantasy when reality refuses to validate the parts of you still waiting to be seen, the apology that never came, the praise you always earned but never received, the moment you stayed strong, silently, and no one noticed. So the mind builds a parallel world, a version of life where you're finally allowed to feel complete. Stoicism doesn't shame this. It studies it. It asks, what is the craving trying to rewrite? Keep a quiet log, not of what you fantasize, but of what you were thinking right before it came. That's the clue. That's the wound. And until you look at that moment with stillness, the fantasy will keep returning, because it's the only place where you think you're safe enough to feel. It's not craving that breaks a man. It's the quiet hope that someone or something will give him what he's been starving for. You don't spiral because you want too much. You spiral because you expect a return from your discipline, from your sacrifice, from the respect you kept offering, even when it was never returned. Expectation is the addiction no one talks about. You plant the seed, then wait for applause. You give love, then wait for loyalty. You stay silent, hoping she notices. And when the world doesn't respond the way you hoped, you turn that silence into self-blame, or worse, into a new craving, something to fill the space where recognition never came. Zeno didn't teach men to control desire. He taught them to let go of the need for harvest, to plant anyway, to act in alignment with their deepest values regardless of outcome. That's Stoic energy, not resisting pleasure, but releasing entitlement. Because the moment you stop expecting the world to validate you, you begin reclaiming the part of you that never needed to beg in the first place. There's a reason the cravings come at night. Not because the urge is stronger, but because your guard is weaker. When the world quiets, so do your distractions. And what's left is you, unfiltered, unshielded, unprepared. The fatigue isn't just physical, it's emotional. The slow erosion of holding it together all day, only to face your reflection when no one's watching. Decision fatigue is real. The body is tired. The mind is worn. The soul, often forgotten. After 9 p.m., dopamine dips. The nervous system seeks relief, and what's disguised as desire is often just exhaustion, emotional, psychological, spiritual. You crave not because you're indulgent, but because something in you feels depleted and unseen. Marcus Aurelius wrote at dawn for a reason. He knew the mind is most vulnerable when untended. So he trained it early, gave it clarity before desire could corrupt perception. That's what Stoic discipline is. Not suppression, but preparation. Not control over urges, but presence before they arrive. The man who breaks at night isn't weak. He's just never been taught to greet himself before the darkness does. Most men react because they never learned to pause. They confuse urgency with truth, but the body's first signal is rarely wisdom. It's a flare, a warning, a scar speaking before the man has time to listen. That's why silence matters. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of presence. 4 seconds. That's what neuroscience tells us. 4 seconds of pause before the prefrontal cortex re-engages. Before the warrior returns to the room, Zeno trained himself not to flinch, not because he was unfeeling, but because he understood what happens when emotion leads. He practiced stillness not as a performance, but as protection. Lust, anger, hunger, all of them demand immediacy. But the Stoic doesn't give them what they want. He gives them what they fear: observation, awareness, containment. You don't interrupt the hijack by resisting it. You interrupt it by watching it pass through. Like a storm you no longer walk into. The warrior watches first. He acts last, because he knows that reaction is cheap. But response, that's sacred. That's what separates the wounded boy from the grounded man. The world teaches you to move fast. Stoicism teaches you to stay still, just long enough to see the truth beneath the urge. Zeno's Stoic warrior isn't the loudest in the room. He doesn't need to win every argument or prove every point. He doesn't spend his life chasing urges just to feel like a man. He's done with that. Because he knows that real power isn't control. It's presence. It's being rooted in silence when the world tries to pull you back into noise. This man has rebuilt from ruin, not with pride, but with clarity. He knows loss. He's tasted shame. He spent nights reaching for things he wouldn't even name in daylight. But now, he sees. And because he sees, he no longer reacts. He responds, with calm, with purpose, with stillness that doesn't beg for recognition. Epictetus once spoke of urges as a door that opens inward. The more you push, the tighter it holds. But when you stop forcing, when you lean back and observe, the door gives way. That's how discipline works. Not through violence against yourself, but through release, through understanding, through the kind of inner peace that doesn't demand obedience, but earns it. You don't need to win against your urges. You need to stop making them enemies. The moment you understand where they come from, what memory, what hunger, what silence, they begin to lose their grip, not because they disappear, but because they're no longer in charge. You are, not with rage, not with denial, but with steady presence. Your urges are not you. They are stories. Stories that haven't been edited, wounds that haven't been held, needs that were never fully named. And now, as a man, you have the choice to see them, to sit with them, to walk forward anyway, not untouched, but unbroken. You don't need to control every thought. You need to stop believing all of them. The ones that say you're too far gone, that say you're still that boy, that say your worth is measured by how much you suppress. Those voices were never yours to begin with. And when the next urge comes, because it will, you won't need to flinch. You won't need to run. You'll just breathe. And in that breath, in that pause, in that sacred moment of calm awareness, you'll remember who you are. The urge didn't break you. Believing it was you almost did. Now you see it. Now you're free.